Hello, everyone. The loudest message is often unspoken. It's in the absence of words that the deepest truths are revealed. Silence has a weight that words cannot carry, a presence that demands to be felt rather than heard. When someone expects a response but receives nothing, the silence speaks louder than any argument, explanation, or justification ever could. Think about the moments when silence has left you unsettled. A pause in conversation that lingers too long, a stare that carries unspoken disappointment, a room that suddenly falls quiet after a revelation. That silence is not empty, it is full of meaning, full of tension, full of unsaid words that can either comfort or destroy. It is why we struggle with it, why we rush to fill it, why we assume something must be wrong when words stop flowing. But silence is not just an absence, it is an assertion. When someone walks away without a word, when they refuse to engage in petty conflict, when they choose stillness over chaos, their silence delivers a message more powerful than shouting ever could. It says, I am done. It says, I have nothing to prove. It says, you are no longer worth my energy. There is no need for insults, for explanations, for drawn-out arguments. Silence in its purity holds a finality that words often fail to achieve. Some people thrive on reaction. They provoke, they manipulate, they push until they get what they want, your response. Your engagement fuels their control, but silence starves them. It forces them to confront themselves, to sit in the discomfort of their own thoughts, without your validation, without your approval, without your resistance. They expect a fight, but when there is none, when there is only silence, they are left with the unbearable sound of their own insecurity. There is nothing more unsettling than the unknown, and silence creates that uncertainty. It removes predictability. When someone yells at you, you know what they feel. When someone argues with you, you understand their position. But when someone simply remains silent, you are left questioning, what are they thinking? What do they feel? Are they angry? Are they indifferent? The mind begins to spiral, filling in the gaps with assumptions, fears, and regrets. Silence is also a sign of discipline. It is easy to react, to defend, to lash out, but true control is found in restraint. A person who masters silence is a person who cannot be manipulated. They do not allow emotions to dictate their actions. They choose when to speak, and when they do, their words carry undeniable weight because they are not spoken in excess. The world underestimates silence. It sees it as weakness, as submission, but those who understand its power know that it is the ultimate weapon. It forces reflection. It exposes truths. It destroys illusions. And when used intentionally, it sends the loudest message of all. Your silence can be more powerful than words, both as a weapon and a shield. It has the ability to cut deeper than the sharpest insult and protect more effectively than the strongest defense. Silence is not just the absence of speech. It is an intentional choice, a calculated response, a statement without sound. It has the power to shape interactions, control outcomes, and dictate the emotional tone of any situation. As a weapon, silence can dismantle a person's confidence. When someone expects a reaction, whether it be anger, justification, or even an explanation, and they receive nothing, it leaves them unbalanced. They are left questioning their own actions, doubting their words, and searching for meaning in your silence. It is in that uncertainty that their power over you begins to crumble. They cannot manipulate what they cannot control, and when you withhold your words, you take away the very thing they were trying to exploit. Your response. Silence forces people to sit with themselves, to hear their own thoughts echo in the absence of yours. When you do not respond to provocation, you remove the satisfaction that comes with getting under someone's skin. You rob them of the pleasure of your engagement. The more they push, the more frustrated they become. And the more frustrated they become, the more they reveal their own insecurity. Silence, when used correctly, becomes the ultimate counterattack. It exposes the weaknesses of others without you having to lift a finger. But silence is not just an offensive tool, it is also a powerful shield. In a world that demands immediate reactions, where people rush to defend themselves, explain themselves, and justify their every move, Silence is an act of self-control. It protects you from unnecessary conflict, from pointless debates, from being dragged into battles that do not serve you. It allows you to maintain your dignity, your peace, and your focus. When you refuse to respond to negativity, you deny it access to your mind. You create a barrier between yourself and the chaos of others. You demonstrate that their words hold no power over you. This is why silence is feared, because it shows strength. A person who does not feel the need to explain themselves is a person who is secure. A person who does not engage in petty arguments is a person who values their energy. A person who chooses silence over unnecessary confrontation is a person who understands that not every battle is worth fighting. There is wisdom in knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. Words have power, but silence carries weight. It forces people to reflect, it shifts dynamics, it removes the fuel from unnecessary fires. It allows you to stand firm without engaging in a war you never needed to fight. Whether you use it to expose weakness or to protect your own strength, silence is always an advantage. It is both a weapon and a shield, and when you learn to master it, you control more than just the conversation, you control the outcome. Some people expect your response to validate their control over you. What happens when you give them nothing? They begin to lose their power. They realize they have no hold over you, no ability to manipulate your emotions, no influence over your actions. Your silence dismantles their control, leaving them grasping for something that no longer exists. People who seek control thrive on your reactions. They want to provoke you to elicit a response that affirms their importance in your life. Whether through criticism, insults, or manipulation, they push and push until they get what they want: your engagement. When you argue back, defend yourself, or even acknowledge their attempts, you feed their sense of authority. You give them confirmation that their words or actions affect you. But the moment you stop reacting, you strip them of that power. Silence is unsettling to those who seek control. It forces them to question their own influence, to wonder why their tactics no longer work. When you don't explain yourself, don't defend yourself, don't fall into their traps, they are left with nothing to hold on to. The more they try to provoke a reaction, the more desperate they become. They may escalate their efforts, trying harder to get a rise out of you, but the more they fail, the weaker they appear. Control is an illusion that only exists if you allow it. When you give someone the ability to dictate your emotions, you hand over a piece of yourself. But silence reclaims that power. It sets boundaries without needing to declare them. It says, "You do not get to decide how I feel. You do not get to control how I respond. You do not have authority over my peace." Not reacting is not the same as weakness. In fact, it is one of the strongest things you can do. It requires discipline, patience, and self-awareness. It forces the other person to face themselves, to deal with their own emotions instead of projecting them onto you. They are left with their own frustration, their own insecurities, their own need for control, with no one to validate it. And that is where the real shift happens. When you give them nothing, they begin to unravel. They realize that the only way they ever had control was through your willingness to engage. Without that, they are powerless. They either learn to adjust, to meet you with respect instead of manipulation, or they eventually fade into irrelevance. Either way, you win. Silence is not submission. It is a statement. It is a refusal to play their game. It is a declaration that their words and actions have no power over you. And when they finally see that, when they recognize that you are no longer giving them what they crave, they are forced to confront the truth: they were never in control to begin with. Not every battle requires your voice. Sometimes silence is the ultimate act of defiance. In a world where people expect reactions, where conflict thrives on engagement, the decision to remain silent can be the most powerful response. It is not avoidance, nor is it surrender. It is a conscious choice to remove yourself from battles that do not deserve your energy. There is an expectation that when challenged, you must respond. that when accused, you must defend, that when provoked, you must retaliate. But what happens when you do none of those things? When you withhold your words, you create an imbalance. You disrupt the cycle of conflict. You leave the other person unsettled, grasping for the reaction they were certain they would receive. The battle they were hoping for never begins, and suddenly they are left alone with their own noise. Silence is not weakness, it is control. It forces the other person to confront their own words without the distraction of your defense. It makes them question themselves in a way that no argument ever could. When you choose not to engage, you strip away their ability to manipulate the conversation. You deny them the fuel they need to keep the fire going. And in that denial, they lose their grip on the situation. Some battles are designed to waste your time, to drain your energy, to pull you into a conflict that serves no purpose. Engaging in every argument, responding to every insult, explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. These are battles that do nothing but deplete you. But when you stay silent, when you refuse to give them the reaction they are seeking, you rob them of their victory. They wanted your anger, your frustration, your emotional investment. Instead, they are met with nothing, and that nothing is more powerful than anything you could have said. Silence also commands a different kind of respect. Words are easy to throw around. People speak without thinking, react without understanding, argue without listening, but silence requires discipline. It forces patience. It shows that you are in control, that you are not swayed by provocation, that you refuse to be pulled into battles that do not align with your purpose. There is strength in restraint. When you speak, let it be because you have chosen to, not because someone has forced your hand. Let your words carry weight, not be wasted in unnecessary disputes. And when the moment calls for it, when the battle is not worth your breath, let silence speak for you. Those who understand the power of silence know that sometimes the greatest act of defiance is not fighting back. It is standing firm without a word, refusing to be moved, and letting the absence of your voice become the loudest statement of all. The absence of reaction can be more painful than an argument. It forces them to face themselves. When someone attacks you with words, they expect resistance. They want engagement. They want a reaction that justifies their hostility. But when you give them nothing, when you refuse to fuel their fire, they are left alone with their own thoughts, their own insecurities, and their own unresolved issues. The silence you offer is not empty. It is filled with a mirror reflecting their own behavior back at them. Arguments provide an escape. When people are confronted with their own flaws, they often seek to shift the focus outward. They provoke, they insult, they create chaos, all to avoid looking inward. But silence denies them that escape. Without an external distraction, they are forced to sit with the very things they were trying to project onto you. And that, more than any counter-argument, is what unsettles them the most. When you respond, you give them an opening to shift blame, to twist words, to manipulate the narrative. But silence does not allow for distortion. It leaves only one thing for them to wrestle with: their own conscience, the weight of their words, the impact of their actions, the consequences of their choices. All of it returns to them with no one else to absorb the impact. There is an expectation that conflict must be met with conflict, that if someone pushes you, you must push back, that if they raise their voice, you must match their volume. But when you do not meet aggression with aggression, when you do not respond with anger, you dismantle the very foundation of their attack. Their words lose their power. Their attempts to provoke become meaningless. They are left grasping for something that no longer exists. A reaction from you. This is why silence is often more painful than an argument. An argument gives them something to hold on to, a way to justify their actions, a reason to continue engaging. But silence forces them to confront the truth. It creates a space where they have no choice but to reflect on why they needed your reaction in the first place. It exposes their dependence on your emotional response, revealing just how much control they thought they had. Some will try to provoke further, escalating their efforts in a desperate attempt to break your silence. Others will retreat, uncomfortable with the realization that their words hold no weight. But regardless of their reaction, one thing remains true. Your refusal to engage is not weakness, but strength. It is a deliberate choice to remove yourself from unnecessary battles, to protect your peace, and to let those who seek conflict deal with their own inner turmoil. When you deny them a reaction, you force them to face themselves. And for many, that is the most painful battle of all. When you stop feeding the fire, you watch it die on its own. Conflict, like fire, requires fuel to keep burning. It thrives on reaction, on engagement, on the energy you pour into it. Every time you argue back, defend yourself, or try to explain your perspective to someone committed to misunderstanding you, you add another log to the fire. But what happens when you stop? When you refuse to engage? The flames, no matter how fierce they once were, begin to fade. People who provoke you expect resistance. They want you to react, to fight, to defend, to explain. Your reaction validates them. It gives them something to work with, something to push against, something to control. But when you deny them that reaction, when you remove yourself from the cycle of conflict, they are left with nothing, and without fuel, their fire has no choice but to burn out. Not every battle requires your participation. Some fights are nothing more than traps designed to drain you, to distract you, to pull you into a war that serves no purpose. You don't need to win every argument. You don't need to prove your point to people who have already decided not to listen. Sometimes the most powerful move you can make is to walk away, not because you are weak, but because you are wise enough to know that your energy is better spent. The moment you stop engaging, you take back control. You shift the power dynamic. You refuse to be a source of fuel for someone else's chaos. And while at first they may try harder to provoke you, pushing boundaries and testing your silence, eventually they will tire themselves out. They will realize that without your participation, the conflict cannot continue. Silence is not submission, it is strategy. It is the art of conserving your strength for battles that actually matter. It is the understanding that not every opinion needs a response, not every insult deserves a rebuttal, not every fight is worth your time. Some fires, if left alone, will suffocate under their own weight. And when you choose to step back instead of engaging, you allow that process to happen naturally. There is power in restraint. It takes strength to remain silent when every part of you wants to respond. It takes discipline to let the fire die rather than feeding it out of pride, anger, or the need to be understood. But those who master this understand something most people never do. You do not have to fight every battle to win the war. So the next time someone tries to pull you into a conflict, ask yourself, is this worth my energy? If the answer is no, let the fire die. Step back, say nothing, watch as without your participation, the flames that once burned so fiercely fade into nothing. In the end, silence is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is the ability to recognize that not every battle is worth fighting, not every argument deserves a response, and not every fire needs to be fueled. When you stop engaging with negativity, you take back control. You force others to confront their own words and actions without your participation. You strip away their power by refusing to be their source of energy. True strength lies not in how loudly you can argue, but in how disciplined you are in choosing when to speak and when to remain silent. Sometimes the greatest act of defiance is walking away, allowing the fire to burn out on its own. Protect your peace, guard your energy, and remember, silence, when used wisely, speaks louder than any words ever could. Thank you for listening. Stay strong and choose your battles wisely.